Spiritual awakening and after-death communication. Why are the following stories important to learn? Discover how they are placed in the schematic of spiritual awakening experiences. Although the title of this video is After-Death Communication and Spiritual Awakening, there are two stories about pre-death communication as well as after-death communication. Trauma-induced communication related to spiritual awakening and death, out-of-body experience, and heightened and extraordinary experiences that all contribute to the process of spiritual awakening. All of the examples are of spontaneous and unexpected experiences. And at the end of the video, there's an explanation of the experiences related to spiritual awakening and how sharing these stories transforms us. These stories are important to hear because it helps to normalize what is considered unordinary, learning about the situation as well as the effects in the mental, emotional, spiritual, and etheric systems, and how we experience through our physical body also is beneficial in furthering understanding in our culture who have been removed from the sacredness of death and the process of death, and in relation to our spiritual awakening process. We are uneasy and left without knowing how to grieve, what to expect, how death is an ordinary experience and reveals the layers of our connection to the other world. It is through looking at our dreams, our intuition, insights, and synchronicity, which are speaking to us as the psyche, that we are reminded of our sacred connection to the great mystery. After death, spiritual awakening experience, Aletheia performing Shemara and Buddhist chanting. Aletheia was brought up in Tucson, Arizona as a Catholic. She moved to New York City and started working for a business when she was out of college, which led her to marrying the son in the family. And the family was Jewish, and she converted to Judaism. As time went on, Aletheia became a practicing Buddhist, learning different chants, which is not a conflict with her role in Judaism. Her husband became a leader in the synagogue that had specific requirements and roles. One of the practices in Judaism is Shemara, which is a person who stays with the deceased until burial because their beliefs are the human soul needs to be respected and reverenced. The human soul stays with the physical body, but is not attached to it for a period of 3 to 7 days after death. The person who stays with the deceased is a reverent and sacred watcher. A shumeret is the name given for a woman who fulfills this task, and a male is a shomer. Aletheia's husband could not fulfill this task because of his role in the synagogue, so Aletheia volunteered to stay overnight alone. Aletheia stayed with the body through the night and decided to begin Buddhist chants as a way to stay awake and to fulfill her role. While she was chanting, she looked up at one moment and towards the body and noticed a very large luminous being standing at the head of the body and another similar large luminous being at the feet. She could feel their energy, their benevolence filling the room. She was transformed by this experience. Aletheia's chanting allowed her to transcend ordinary consciousness and accessed a heightened state through her breathing and the sounds and the repetitions and the pattern. This process also affects our heart rate and brain waves simultaneously. These changes allowed Aletheia to perceive and see beyond ordinary reality into the other world, where she witnessed the presence and the energy and felt that of these large luminous beings that some would identify as angels. In this shift in consciousness, Alethea knew there was more to death and the process of dying, which gave her comfort and knowing not only about the process, but about the connection from this world to the other. Her electromagnetic system, etheric, mental, and emotional systems were also impacted because the experience was deep and it affected her ordinary reality. However, Alethea did not have a support group or people to share the experience to gain further understanding, and so kept the experience to herself, except for she shared it with me because she felt safe and comfortable. And I also want to state as I go on, all of these stories have the names changed to protect anonymity. The next title is called Before Death Communication, Morgane and Leticia. Morgane was a young woman who had a relationship with her dreams where she remembered different experiences and dreams throughout her life. Morgane had a female friend, Leticia, she had known for about 15 years and also knew Leticia's family very well. Leticia had started using substances before their friendship began and continued occasionally. As time went on, Morgane noticed Leticia started using different substances and did go into treatment and went on with her life. One morning, Morgane woke up from a dream where Leticia had come to her, and through thought transference and emotional transference conveyed that she was ready to leave Earth. There was more to the story because she also relayed that she was not unhappy or dissatisfied. She wasn't depressed. She wasn't using drugs, and she didn't have issues that she was concerned about. She did not have any trauma. She was in a good state, but she was ready to leave. Morgane woke up and remembered the dream because it was very vivid and also had strong emotional content that did not dissipate. And it was not like a processing dream, and it was different from other dreams. About 2 weeks later, Leticia did die, which was unexpected because she was healthy and had not started using drugs again. This story would end here, but there's more. Because Morgane was friends with the family, after the funeral, she shared that she had this before-death communication with Leticia, who told her that she was going to leave and that she was happy. They weren't angry, they weren't shocked, they accepted the information and further were comforted by Morgane's sharing. In some situations, Morgane's sharing may have been unwelcome and even considered malevolent or negative, but Leticia's family felt the information was even more than comforting, but helped them process their unexpected loss of their daughter and sibling. This next example is called trauma-induced out-of-body experience that was life-saving pre-death communication, Miguel and Yogi. Miguel was a Vietnam veteran as a Navy SEAL. He had seen 9 tours and was surprised he lived through all these experiences because everyone else in his team had died but one person. The following story, Miguel and his fellow Navy SEAL Yogi companion. Miguel and Yogi were often surrounded and in combat because of their expertise and the kind of missions they were sent on. In the jungle, one day they found they were surrounded by enemy fire and knew they had scouted the area to the best of their ability. They were certain they would not survive. Under this heightened and adrenaline-driven situation, they understood without speaking their lives were over and this was the end. Suddenly, without warning, Miguel was in a heightened state where he was above the situation, overhead and out of his body. In this state, he was communicating with his grandmother, who he had lived with as a child for a number of years. His grandmother was showing him a path that led out of the area safely that neither Yogi nor Miguel knew about. This was an aerial view of that area that showed where the path was and where it led. Miguel returned to his body. This all happened instantaneously and communicated to Yogi that he knew of a path and how to get out, and Yogi should follow. The decision to follow was instantaneous, as there were no other choices. And because you're hearing about this story, it was told, as it was told to me, you know that Miguel made it out and returned to the United States. Later, it was correlated that around the time that he had this out-of-body trauma-induced pre-death communication, Miguel's grandmother was preparing to pass. The above story has several areas that are imperative to understand about our capabilities with using different abilities to derive answers for problem solving, gain insight that involve beyond the ingredients of a current or given situation. When people are able to expand and trust a greater knowing, connection, and expansive experience, there are unforeseen answers that are beyond our capacity to know at the time. This was a trauma-induced, high-stress situation that pushed Miguel to access an ability that he had accessed once or twice before when he was a young child as an out-of-body experience. Miguel had remembered visiting Catalina Island as a young camper for a week as a child and going out of his body to visit the different areas on the island. Although he had not been to the island before, he was able to know which path to take and where it led, which was surprising to the camp leaders because they thought he was lying. Although the trauma-induced experience forced him to go out of his body, the wisdom gained was accurate and applied and was life-saving for two people. Miguel's memory of these experiences changed his perspective on life and the abilities people have, and allowed him to value other forms of accessing higher states of consciousness through meditation that he began after he returned to the United States and after his life as a Navy SEAL. And the next example is called after-death communication, Joan in the forest. Joan was a client of mine for several years, and I had grown to love her. She was a young girl before World War II and was from a very wealthy family. Joan talked like Julia Child, which I found enchanting, along with her stories and travels and experiences and how they impacted her, and stories about her son who lived near. Joan was quite elderly, and as time went on, she was encountering more difficulty navigating her life. I visited Joan in the hospital, and even once I brought my pug, who I smuggled in, which delighted her no end. I never met Joan's son, but I felt I knew him, although he did not know me. As time went on and Joan required more physical care, I called her son and offered to be of assistance if he needed help. And I assumed because he didn't know me, he felt I was an outsider and he did not take me up on my offer. So I did not know when Joan passed, which occurred about 4 months later. But how did I know? I was camping in Sedona, Arizona on Oak Creek. And one morning, as I was waking up, I saw Joan in the forest. She had on a long coat that was stylish from the 1940s and was walking away. She had a jaunty spring in her step, and as she walked on a path. And after some steps, she slightly turned toward me, and with a nod of her head, she brought her arm up towards her face and gave me a wave. After this acknowledgement, she took a few more steps and began to fade away into the forest until she disappeared. That is how I knew she had passed. I was very grateful for this farewell and for the manner in which it was delivered with a sense of jauntiness and delight, and that she was on an adventure and a journey, and this is how she was in life. Accepting the communication and not questioning the origin or meaning at face value is one of the aspects of that experience. While this was a dream, which is an in-between liminal state where we are unbiased by cultural programming, social norms, and expectations of how the world should be. This is often where we meet those who have passed or will pass. Another example is after-death communication with an animal companion, Henry. Henry was a Dalmatian that arrived in my yard, and he just showed up by running wildly and enthusiastically with energy. After looking to see if he was chipped and calling the Humane Society and seeing if anybody had reported they had lost Henry, it was clear he was on the loose and needed a home because nobody claimed him after several weeks. He was wild from being left alone. He was undisciplined and not housebroken, even though the vet said he was around almost 5 years old. It was the reason Henry arrived in my yard was because he was a runner, and he remained a runner. Whenever the door was open a crack, he would make a great effort to force his way through and escape from the sheer joy of running. He didn't know where he was going, he was just running. More than once, when someone would arrive at the door, although making every effort to secure their entry, Henry would force his way through, immediately bolting at full speed. And when Henry arrived, I already had 3 small dogs and a cat, so Henry was added to the mix. Henry spent 5 years at my house, and he became house trained and part of the family, but as he grew older, he changed. He became dominant towards the other dogs and cat. They acted like they didn't want to move in fear of his wrath. And then Henry attacked one of the other dogs several times with the intensity to death. I learned from getting bitten and getting stitches never to intervene on a dog fight. My son also got bitten, and I realized I had to do something about Henry, which was a very difficult decision because I knew that meant I had to give him away or I had to put him down. I found a Dalmatian rescue and told them he had been aggressive with another dog, and they still were willing to take him. I was deeply conflicted and heartbroken as I felt I was betraying him, like giving away one of my children. About 4 years later, I had an unexpected dream, and in the dream, Henry showed up. Henry told me that he was grateful for being taken in, for being house trained and loved, and he appreciated the love of placing him in a loving home. This was deeply meaningful because I had felt so strongly that I had betrayed him, and I felt the energy through thought transference and emotional connection of what he was conveying to me. The next example and story is called After Death Communication, Jenna and Cosmo. Jenna was a medical doctor who specialized in working with the severe mentally ill during their hospitalization. She was married to a medical doctor, Cosmo, who was an alcoholic. After over 30 years of marriage, Jenna gave her husband an ultimatum and said he had to go into treatment for his alcoholism or she was going to divorce him. Jenna's husband, Cosmo, lived about 4 months longer and then died. And Jenna was distraught about his passing and had many different emotions, including regret. She hadn't insisted earlier, and anger and sadness. After around a year after Cosmo passed, Jenna was at home and sat down in her living room in a comfortable chair in the middle of the day, which was not an ordinary thing she would do. When she sat in the chair, she felt very tired and fell asleep, and she also never slept or took naps in the middle of the day. She heard someone come down the hallway and got up out of the chair to see who it was. She felt the chair and felt her feet walk across the floor. When she was in the hallway, she discovered it was Cosmo, who had walked down the hall to see her. Jenna and Cosmo immediately hugged. She felt him in her embrace. She felt his shoulders and upper torso. Jenna also was aware of the familiar odor of his presence. She was very glad and grateful to see Cosmo and to know he was doing well. They had some thought transference, also called telepathy. And shortly after this transpired, Cosmo's cell phone rang and he said he had to go. As soon as he said that, Jenna woke up. She realized all the details of her experience were more vivid than waking life. She was comforted and felt grateful for the experience. She also realized previously she would have thought if someone described this type of experience, they would need to be on medication and would have a mental health diagnosis. This experience was a spiritual awakening for Jenna about communication and experiences with someone after they've passed that expanded her sense of what is possible, about significant contact with a person after their physical body is no longer on earth. This experience had additional different components that were transformational, which include the following. Number one, there can be and is communication after death. Number two, auditory, thought transference, kinesthetic, and emotional communication occur beyond physical embodiment. Number three, communication can occur without vocalization, and it holds vibrancy, deep meaning, provides profound connection and emotional impact. Number four, other than ordinary consciousness experiences are not always hallucinations, but can be vivid and meaningful for the rest of a person's life. And number five, Jenna was capable of perceiving in different intuitive ways beyond ordinary reality. And number six, a non-ordinary experience is often profound and is remembered for life because it's cherished. After death communication, the next story, Rhea and Stevie Ray. Rhea and her ex-husband Charles had a son, Stevie Ray, with cerebral palsy. About 9 years after Rhea and Charles divorced, Charles unexpectedly died at a young age, leaving all the care and decisions about their son with Rhea. Although Rhea had been competently making decisions and caring for Stevie Ray, there were some trying decisions that she was in the process of making and had been laboring over for a while. One night, in the middle of the night, Rhea woke up because she felt and heard at the foot of her bed a sound, and then she felt the bed go down with someone sitting on it. This was startling, and Rhea woke up to see Charles sitting at the foot of her bed. Charles informed Rhea he was there because of her concern for the decisions she was making about Stevie Ray. He wanted to reassure her that her decisions were going in the right direction and that he approved and supported her. Charles knew that the direction she was going and the decisions would be beneficial to Stevie Ray. Rhea's next memory is of waking up and realizing she'd been asleep and thought she had woken up to have a conversation with Charles. She was sure he was there because she felt the pressure of Charles' weight on the bed and also heard the sound, which is what woke her up. Although Rhea knew she had been, quote, dreaming, unquote, she also was aware of the different components of her experience that made it stand out in vividness. She experienced auditory communication through thought transference, telepathy, comfort and emotional connection and support, and had the experience of the pressure on her bed and the sound of the bed going down. The vivid nature of this, quote, dream, unquote, experience made the after-death communication last in Rhea's memory. After-death communication revealed Charles caring for their son, Stevie Ray, which she had not been certain about because he had been kind of in and out of participating. And the other element is the different qualities of intuitive abilities through thought transference, telepathy, the sound of the bed going down, waking up to experience the pressure on the bed, and the emotional connection and transference of caring were significant elements of the after-death communication. Characteristics of after-death communication have been researched, while pre-death communication and after-death communication with animals have little to no research. Also, experiences with out-of-body trauma-induced experiences that are beneficial have little to no research. Although the research is about people who are living and people who have passed, the characteristics of these experiences are also applicable to animals and creatures that communicate with us after death, and how we take in and accept the occurrence through our sensory knowing, which are sensing the presence in waking consciousness or a heightened state, can be a dream state, and knowing who it is. This ability is also known as clairsentience, hearing or auditory communication that is identifiable to a specific person or being, and this is called clairaudience, and kinesthetic experience of a substance, and this does not have an official title. The official name I've assigned this phenomena during after-death communication is clairtouch, and smelling an odor that is connected to a specific person or creature. This ability is also known as clairaudience or clairaudience. Visually seeing, which also can occur as an inner seeing, and most of the time is inner seeing, but people talk about it like it's a video, but it isn't external that way. And this ability is also known as clairvoyance. For most people, most of the time, these experiences occur during dreaming, which is when waking up, sometimes when falling asleep, and also during other times when we're not in ordinary consciousness, which can include meditation. All of these states are called non-ordinary consciousness. However, they are very ordinary because they're normal and people experience them frequently in after-death communication and in other ways, as these stories have shown. In these states of consciousness, our social norm acceptance, our cultural programming, and rules about what is possible and acceptable are suspended. It is also noted that because of our cultural programming, we are more inclined to be alarmed and get a mental health label if we have experiences related to pre-death or after-death communication while we're in a waking state. And we do know there are people who specialize in that kind of communication. But there is still this feeling that it's not acceptable. However, as we continue to normalize these experiences, we are empowering ourselves. As we reclaim our views of beyond ordinary consciousness, we are bridging our willingness to touch, experience, know, and become informed by the other world that has always been there. As we discuss and share these normal experiences, those people who do perceive beyond ordinary consciousness consistently hold the lantern as way showers and guides. Once we were swept away from our connection by dominating forces because our innate connection touches us at a profound knowing level that contributes to our empowerment that were meant to be squashed out of us through violence and labels. We are no longer tentative about these areas, but hold them as part of our beings, part of our connection and our normal abilities and experiences that are expansive beyond our five senses as multisensory beings. In our reclamation, we are going beyond where we have been and growing and advancing. These are all part of our spiritual awakening experiences. Please share your comments below and about after-death, pre-death communication, out-of-body experiences. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe and check out the 3 Malete programs.